The morning light fell like liquid gold across the marble floor of the Kapoor mansion. The air was still, save for the soft hum of the city outside and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock that had seen too many quiet breakfasts. Ethan Kapoor, 31, sharpshooted and unflinchingly composed, sat at the edge of the long dining table, a man used to commanding boardrooms, not emotions. Across from him sat Lily, small-town eyes, simple white kurta, head tied in a loose braid. The silence between them wasn't cold, just unsure. Two strangers bound by a signature on paper. Ethan's mother had arranged it all, an old promise, a favor repaid. To Lily, it was an escape from debt, a chance for her family to breathe. To Ethan, it was an inconvenience disguised as tradition. But that morning, when she quietly slid a cup of tea toward him, their fingers brushed, and something unspoken flickered. A warmth he hadn't expected. A softness she tried to hide. "Thank you," he murmured, the words foreign on his tongue. She smiled, small, unsure, but real. It lingered in the air longer than the scent of cardamom. That smile would be the beginning of everything he didn't know he was missing. Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city. Let's see how wide kindness still spreads. At first, they moved like parallel lines. Polite, distant, never crossing. Ethan would leave early for work, his tie knotted with precision, his eyes never meeting haze. Lily would stay home, tending to his mother, watering the plants that seemed more alive than the people around her. The staff whispered about her, too quiet, too simple. She doesn't fit. But she didn't seem to mind. Every evening, she'd sit by the kitchen window, sketching something no one ever saw. One evening, Ethan came home earlier than usual. The house was dim, only the kitchen light glowed softly. He found her there, crouched on the floor beside his mother's wheelchair, reading to her. His mother, who hadn't smiled in years, was laughing. Lily looked up, startled, like a child caught trespassing in someone else's dream. Ethan froze at the doorway. For the first time, he saw not a simple girl, but someone who carried light wherever she went. Later that night, when he passed by her room, he paused. Through the half-open door, he saw her desk, scattered with papers, sketches, bits of watercolor. In the center lay a half-finished painting, a portrait of his mother, smiling. He didn't say a word, but something inside him, something buried under pride and loneliness, stirred. Days passed. They began sharing small words over breakfast. She'd ask about his day, and he'd find himself answering more than he needed to. He started waiting for her laughter, quiet, like wind through leaves. When his mother fell ill again, Lily was there, night after night, her hand steady, her voice calm. She prayed quietly, not for herself, but for a woman who barely spoke to her. One evening, after a particularly long meeting, Ethan returned home to find Lily sitting on the stairs, her face pale, tears on her cheeks. "She's not waking up," she whispered. He rushed to his mother's room. The monitors were flat, the world was still. Lily clutched his hand as he broke for the first time in years. No words, just shared silence, heavy and human. After the funeral, the house felt unbearably large. Ethan sat alone in his study when Lily walked in, holding a small envelope. "She wrote this for you," she said softly. Her eyes were swollen but kind. Inside, in his mother's frail handwriting, were the words, "Don't lose the one who reminds you what love feels like." He looked up at Lily then, really looked, and realized he didn't even know her story. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. That night, he knocked on her door. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. She nodded. "Why do you always hide those paintings?" She hesitated. "They are not meant for showing. Just memories I can't forget." "Memories?" he asked. Her eyes softened. "Of people I lost." He didn't push further. But that night, long after she'd closed her door, he couldn't sleep. The image of her sitting beside his mother, painting light into her fading days, haunted him gently. For the first time, Ethan Kapoor, the man who measured success in profit margins and headlines, wondered if he had ever truly seen another human being. and for the first time in years, he wanted to try. The following morning, the house felt different, quieter, almost thoughtful. Ethan found himself lingering in the kitchen, watching Lily make tea. She moved with an ease that didn't belong in a house built on wealth and walls. There was grace in her simplicity, the way she hummed under her breath, the way she looked at the world as if even ordinary things were worth loving. He cleared his throat. "Do you always paint people?" She blinked, surprised he was speaking first. "Sometimes. Mostly faces that tell stories." He smiled faintly. "And mine? What story would it tell?" Her eyes met his, calm, unafraid. A man who built walls so tall, he forgot what the sky looked like. The words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't respond, just nodded slightly and left for work. But that sentence echoed in his head all day, louder than the voices in his meetings, deeper than the sound of his car's engine on the way home. That night, he stopped by her room again. The door was half open, as always. On her table, a new painting, not of faces, but of a small street lined with yellow lamps. Beneath the lamps, a boy selling flowers in the rain. There was something heartbreakingly tender in the brushstrokes, something she had lived through, not imagined. He gently stepped inside. "That boy," he said, "he looks lonely." Lily didn't tone. "He was," she whispered, until someone gave him a flower back. Ethan watched her closely. She wasn't just painting pictures. She was painting memories. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes, and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Days melted into weeks. They began to find rhythm. Shared laughter over burnt toast, quiet dinners, small exchanges that grew into something unspoken. But the mansion's servants whispered more loudly now. They said she was lucky, a charity case, not his type. Ethan heard them once, and something inside him snapped. At breakfast, when one of them muttered again, he looked up sharply. "If anyone here disrespects my wife again," he said, voice like ice, "they won't be here tomorrow." Lily froze mid-sip, her eyes wide. The staff went silent. Ethan got up and left. But behind that anger wasn't arrogance. It was protection. Something he'd never felt the need to give anyone before. Later that day, she found him in his study, staring out at the rain. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He turned to her. "I did. People talk. It doesn't hurt me." He looked at her, really looked. "But it hurts me." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of the things neither day'd say. That evening, he came home late again. As he stepped into the dim living room, he saw a light under the old piano. She was sitting there, playing softly, hesitant notes that floated like forgotten memories. "I didn't know you played," he said. She stopped. "I haven't in years." "Why stop?" "Sometimes music reminds you of what you're trying to forget." He sat beside her on the floor. "Then maybe it's time to remember." She looked at him, startled by the gentleness in his voice. The mansion clock ticked. The rain outside whispered. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, it felt like they weren't strangers anymore. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." That night, she told him the story of her village, how her father lost everything in a flood, how she took care of her younger sister, how art became the only way she could hold on to the past without breaking. Ethan listened quietly, not interrupting once. For a man who built his empire on numbers, it was the first time words meant more than balance sheets. "You never told anyone this?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one ever asked." And something inside him, something deep, something old, cracked open. He thought of all the parties he'd been to, the noise, the laughter, the women who only saw his wealth. And here she was, a girl who carried silence like it was her strength, who painted people not to show off, but to heal them. That night, Ethan Kapoor couldn't sleep again. But it wasn't loneliness this time. It was something gentler, something he was afraid to name. The next morning began with the sound of laughter, not his, but hers. Ethan lingered outside the dining room, watching Lily help the gardener's little boy, Arjun, tie a broken shoelace. She knelt in her white dress, her hair catching the sunlight like threads of gold. The boy grinned up at her as she ruffled his hair, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan imagined what his house might have looked like if it had always held this kind of warmth. When she noticed him, she smiled. "You're up early," she said. He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." "Work." He hesitated. "Something like that." She poured him tea, not out of duty, but habit now, and for the first time, he didn't reach for his phone. They sat quietly, the air between them softer than it used to be. She spoke of simple things, how she missed the smell of wet earth, how the city lights made the stars disappear. He listened, eyes drifting from her words to her hands, paint stained even in the morning. "Do you ever paint for yourself?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But I've learned that beauty hurts less when it belongs to others." He wanted to ask her what that meant, but she looked away, and the question stayed suspended in the quiet. That afternoon, Ethan returned early from the office. The house was empty, except for a faint melody coming from upstairs. Following the sound, he found her in a sunlit room he had never entered before. The walls were covered with canvases, dozens of them. Children playing in the rain, an old man feeding pigeons, a woman praying beside a hospital bed. Every brushstroke bled empathy. At the center stood a single painting covered with cloth. She didn't notice him at first. When he spoke, she jumped. "I didn't mean to startle you." Her eyes darted to the covered painting. "You weren't supposed to see these." "They are beautiful," he said softly. "They are private." He took a hesitant step closer. "Then why hide them in a room like this? These deserve to be seen." Her lips trembled, and for the first time, he saw something flicker behind her calm, fear. "Because one of them shouldn't exist," she whispered. "If that moment hit you hard, leave a red hot hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't." He stared at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Lily hesitated, eyes dropping to the floor. "That painting," she said, nodding toward the covered canvas. "It's not mine. Not entirely. It's borrowed from a memory I wish I didn't have." Ethan took another step forward, curiosity and concern entwined. "Can I see it?" She didn't move. "Please don't." He stopped. Something in her tone, raw, pleading, told him this wasn't about art anymore. It was about pain. Deep, buried pain. Instead of pressing, he said quietly, "All right, I won't." She looked up, surprised. "You're not angry?" "For what? Having a past." Her eyes shimmered, and for a moment, her composure cracked. "Most people don't want to know it," she said. "Maybe I'm not most people," Ethan replied. That night, she stood at her window long after he left. Down below, he was sitting in the courtyard, staring at the stars that had returned after weeks of rain. For a man who never noticed the sky, it was almost poetic, she thought. The next few days passed like slow rivers, full of silence that said more than words. He began working from home, drawn not by convenience, but by presence. She'd bring him tea. He'd help her choose frames for her art. Small gestures, but each one a stitch in the invisible fabric growing between them. And then one evening, she didn't come home. Ethan waited past midnight, pacing, calling her name through empty holes. Her phone was switched off. Panic, an unfamiliar guess in his chest, began to claw. He called the driver, the guard, even the nearby clinic. No one had seen her. By dawn, he was on the streets, searching himself. When he finally found her, she was sitting on the curb outside a small orphanage, eyes swollen, sorry damp from tears. A broken sketchbook lay beside her. "Lily!" He rushed forward. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She looked up, voice trembling. "This is where I grew up," she whispered. "They are tearing it down tomorrow." He followed her gaze, a crumbling old building with faded paint and laughter still echoing from its walls. She pressed the sketchbook to her chest. "Everything I am started here, and now it's gone." He knelt beside her, rain beginning to fall, soaking them both. He didn't know what to say, so he did the one thing he could. He held her, for the first time, without restraint, without calculation. The city moved around them, cars, people, chaos. But for that moment, They were still, two broken souls under the same storm. And deep down, Ethan knew, whatever secret she was hiding, it had roots deeper than he'd imagined. Rain still clung to the edges of dawn when they drove back in silence. Lily sat by the window, her hands wrapped tightly around that old sketchbook, the one thing she hadn't let him touch. Ethan glanced at her reflection in the glass. Her eyes weren't crying anymore, but they weren't calm either. They were carrying storms that hadn't passed yet. When they reached home, she went straight to her room without a word. He waited in the hallway for a while, listening to the faint sound of pages turning inside. Then, as quietly as he could, he left a steaming cup of tea outside her door, her kind of peace offering, and walked away. Hours passed. Then he heard her voice. "Ethan." He turned. She was standing there, sketchbook in hand. "You should see it," she said softly. "The one I tried to hide." She led him back to the sunlit room. Slowly, she uncovered the painting. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a landscape or a portrait. It was her, but not as she was now. It was a much younger Lily, bruised and thin, holding a paintbrush in trembling hands. Behind her was a man, his face obscured, but his hand gripping her shoulder. Ethan's chest tightened. "Who is that?" She swallowed. "The man who helped me get my first exhibition." Her voice cracked on the word helped. "I was 19. He said my art was beautiful, but that beauty had a price." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. "I never told anyone," she whispered. "Not my parents, not the orphanage. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would stay dead. But it didn't. Every painting I made after that carried a shadow of him." She looked up at him then, not seeking pity, but release. "That's the secret, Ethan. The one I've been hiding. The reason I never let anyone see my work. Because it's born from something ugly." He stepped closer, shaking his head. "No, it's born from survival. From strength. From you turning pain into color." Lily's lip trembled. "You don't understand." "I do," he cut in gently. "Because I've spent my whole life hiding behind success, pretending I wasn't lonely. But you faced something darker and still found a way to create light. That strength I'll never have." The silence after that was sacred. Just two souls, no pretense, no walls. "Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." For a long time, neither spoke. Lily walked toward the window, wiping her tears. "I came here hoping this marriage would be an obligation at best," she admitted. "But it became something I didn't expect. You being kind, Ethan, kinder than you know." He took a slow step forward. "Kindness doesn't cost much." She turned, her eyes softening. "No, but it's rare when it's real." He didn't touch her, not yet. He just stood there, a few feet away, as if afraid one wrong move would shatter everything fragile between them. "You don't have to keep hiding anymore," he said finally. "Not from me." Her voice broke. "Then what do I do with all this pain?" He reached out, just enough for his fingers to brush hers. "Let's carry it together." The simplicity of the words undid her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to lean into someone's warmth. That evening, he called a lawyer. Without telling her, he bought the orphanage building, not as an act of charity, but as a promise. When she found out 2 days later, she confronted him, eyes brimming with disbelief. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "It was part of your story. And now it's safe." Lily looked at him for a long moment, and then something shifted, a quiet, luminous trust. "You don't even know what you've done," she whispered. "Maybe not," he smiled faintly, "but I know how it feels to watch something worth saving disappear." She stepped closer, placed a trembling hand on his chest. "You're not who I thought you were." He smiled sadly. "Neither are you." Outside, the rain began again, not heavy, just a drizzle, soft like a benediction. And in that moment, two hearts, one scarred, one guarded, found a faint outline of peace. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Days turned to weeks. Lily started painting again, this time in the open. Ethan began joining her, bringing her tea, asking about colors he couldn't name. Slowly, the house filled with laughter again. Not loud or perfect, but enough to make even the servants stop whispering. Enough to make Ethan's empty halls breathe. But happiness is a way of testing itself. And one evening, when Lily received an unexpected envelope in the mail, no sender's name, no return address, the old fear returned. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Years ago. That same man behind her. And a note in bold handwriting. You thought you could erase me? The world will know soon. Her hands shook. The photograph slipped from her fingers. Outside, the light flickered, as if the past itself had walked back into the house. Lily's breath caught in her throat. The edges of the photo trembled between her fingers as though it were alive, a ghost clawing its way out of the paper. For a moment, the room seemed to close in around her. The air thinned, the walls pulsed. The only sound was her heart hammering against her ribs. Ethan found her standing frozen by the window, pale as frost. Lily! He stepped closer, and the photograph fluttered to the floor. When he picked it up, his jaw tightened instantly. Who sent this? I don't know, she whispered, but I think I do. The man from her painting, the shadow from her past, had found her. Ethan's face hardened. He's trying to scare you. He already has. He moved closer, steadying her trembling hands. Then he'll have to get through me first. She shook her head. You don't understand how powerful he is. He owns galleries, media connections. If he tells the story his way, I'll look like the liar, like the girl who wanted fame and made things up. Ethan's voice dropped, low but steady. Then we tell the truth before he can. Her eyes widened. You'd risk your reputation for me. He smiled faintly, tired, tender. Lily, it stopped being about reputation a long time ago. That night, he sat beside her in the dim study while she went through old letters and files, her hands shaking over every page. There was pain in her silence, but there was courage too. Every time she paused, he whispered, I'm here, until she believed it. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, two souls began preparing for a storm that was long overdue. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. The next morning, Ethan made some calls. Within hours, his legal team was assembled, his PR manager briefed, and every security camera around the mansion checked. But Lily stayed quiet through it all, lost in her thoughts. When he finally found her in the art room, she was painting again, not people this time, but fire, red and gold, wild and alive. He stood behind her. You're not scared? She didn't stop painting. I am, but fear has taken enough from me. I'm not giving it more. Ethan felt something inside him shift again, admiration, fierce and protective. Then we do this together, he said. She smiled faintly. Together sounds nice. The next week blurred by intention. News began to spread online, whispers of a mystery artist with a scandalous past. Comments flooded social media, some cruel, some curious. Lily refused to look at them, but Ethan did, every word like a blade he couldn't stop reading. Then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. A courier dropped off a thick envelope addressed to Mrs. Capel. Inside, court papers, a defamation threat. From him. Lily sank into a chair, the paper sliding from her hands. He wants to destroy me, she murmured. Ethan knelt before her, taking her face in his hands. He won't, not while I'm breathing. Her eyes filled. You shouldn't have to fix what I broke. He shook his head. You didn't break anything. You survived it. The weight of his words settled like a prayer between them. The next morning, Ethan held a press conference. Cameras flashed, microphones rose, the world buzzed. He stood before them, the billionaire everyone envied, and said, calm and sure, my wife, Lily Capel, is an artist whose work speaks of resilience and truth. Years ago, someone exploited her innocence. She didn't ask to be strong, life demanded it. And today, I stand beside her, not as a businessman, but as a man who has learned that silence is never protection, it's permission for cruelty. For a moment, No one spoke. Then a single clap broke the stillness. One. Then another. By the time he walked off stage, the headlines were already changing. Ethan Kapoor defends wife against exploitation scandal. Back at home, Lily waited by the door. When he walked in, she didn't speak. She just threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. He smiled through the ache. "I already told you. Together. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." The days that followed were both cruel and kind. The man who had haunted her tried to fight back. Interviews, lies, half-truths. But for every venomous word, a wave of people rose to defend her. Artists, survivors, even strangers who had once seen her paintings and felt understood. For the first time, the world wasn't seeing Lily Kapoor as a victim, but as a woman who turned her pain into art and dared to live. And in the quiet hours between chaos, when the house went still and the city outside began to sleep, Ethan would find her painting again. Not fire now, but dawn. Soft gold over blue. A new beginning taking shape under her brush. She'd look at him sometimes with that small, tired smile. "You gave me back my voice." He'd shake his head gently. "You never lost it. You just stopped believing people would listen." But the storm wasn't done yet, not fully, because one night, when Ethan returned from the office, he found his front gate open, a car idling outside, and Lily's phone on the marble floor by the door. She was gone. The sound of the engine still echoed faintly down the street when Ethan ran outside, shouting her name into the darkness. The guard rushed forward, panic written across his face. "Sir, she got into a black car. I tried to stop it, but—" Ethan didn't wait for him to finish. He jumped into his own car, tires screeching, heart pounding hard enough to drown out reason. His calls went unanswered. Every red light felt like an enemy. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain. When her phone tracker finally pinged, it led him to the edge of the old part of town, warehouses and forgotten streets, where the air smelled of rust and oil. He slammed the door shut and ran, breath burning in his lungs. "Lily!" His voice echoed through the narrow alleys. Then, from somewhere inside an old studio, he heard her, muffled, desperate. "Ethan!" He kicked the door open. Inside, the dim light revealed her, tied to a chair, terrified but unbroken. And across from her stood him, the man from the painting, older now, but his arrogance still poisonous. "Well," the man sneered, "the mighty Ethan Kapoor finally arrives. You always had a taste for damaged things, didn't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let her go." The man laughed. "You think you can buy silence with love? She was nothing before me. I made her. I gave her a name, a stage." "You stole her dignity," Ethan spat. The man shrugged. "Details." Lily's voice shook. "Please, don't." But before she could finish, the man grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to look at him. "You think the world forgives so easily. People love a tragedy. Lily, you're their pity project." That's when Ethan moved. He crossed the distance in seconds, fury breaking through years of restraint. He shoved the man back, untied Lily, and pulled her behind him. "Touch her again," Ethan growled, "and I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life begging for mercy." The man smirked, brushing off his coat. "We'll see who they believe." Then he walked out, too confident, too calm. The kind of calm that promised more trouble. Ethan turned to Lily, his hands trembling. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming silently. "You shouldn't have come." He cupped her face gently. "There wasn't a world where I wouldn't." Her breath hitched. For the first time, she didn't try to be strong. She just fell into his arms, sobbing into his shoulder. "I thought I'd never see you again." "You'll always see me," he whispered, "even in the dark." "Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." They stayed there until the sirens grew closer. When the police arrived, Ethan handed over the recording he had secretly taken. Every cruel word, every threat. It was enough. The man was arrested before sunrise. At the station, When the chaos quieted, Lily sat beside Ethan in the waiting area, her hand still in his. "You risked everything," she murmured. He looked at her, exhaustion written across his face. "You are everything." She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder, the first hint of peace in her trembling breath. When they finally returned home, dawn was breaking. The first rays of light touched the marble floors like forgiveness. Ethan walked her to her room, but she stopped him at the door. "Ethan," she whispered, "I don't know how to live after this." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll learn together." For the next few weeks, healing became their quiet ritual. Therapy sessions, long walks, unspoken gratitude. She began painting again, this time on larger canvases, with brighter colors. Ethan sometimes found her lost in thought, staring at a blank wall before suddenly breaking into tears. He never asked why. He just held her until the storm passed. Then, one afternoon, she called him into the art room. "I finished it," she said softly. It was the largest painting yet, a woman standing at the edge of an ocean, waves washing over her feet, face turned toward sunrise. "Who is she?" he asked. Someone who finally stopped being afraid. Ethan smiled, his voice low. "She's beautiful." "She's free," Lily corrected gently. The painting went viral within days. People from across the world began sharing it, calling it The Rise. Her story, the truth, her truth, spread wider than her pain ever had. And somewhere in the quiet between night and morning, she realized she wasn't haunted anymore. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. A month later, Ethan woke to find her gone again, but this time, not in fear. She'd left a note on his pillow, written in her delicate handwriting. "I'm going to the orphanage. I want to turn it into a place where children can paint, dream, and heal. It's time I give back what the world once stole from me. I'll be back by evening. Yours, L." When she returned that night, her clothes were streaked with color, her eyes alight. "It's happening," she said, beaming. "I'm calling it the House of Light." He smiled, pulling her close. "It already is. Lily, you made it one." For the first time in a long time, both of them believed, not in perfect endings, but in new beginnings that dared to exist after the storm. Months passed, but peace didn't slip quietly into their lives. It bloomed, slowly, like morning light crawling across cold stone. The House of Light had become a sanctuary for children who had seen too much of the world too soon. The sound of laughter and paintbrushes filled the old walls that once echoed with silence. Every morning, Ethan would watch Lily tie her apron and head out, her face dusted with sunlight and purpose. She'd return in the evening, tired but radiant, telling him stories of the children, how Arjun learned to mix colors without fear, how Mira painted her first sunrise, how one little boy said, "Miss Lily, painting feels like breathing." Each story wrapped itself around Ethan's heart like a quiet miracle. For a man who once believed love was distraction, he now found himself timing his day by the sound of her laughter. One afternoon, she came home with streaks of green on her hands. "We're painting the outer wall tomorrow," she said breathlessly. "The kids want everyone who passes by to see light before they even walk in." Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And what will you paint?" She paused, her eyes softening. "Hope." He kissed her forehead. "Then it's already perfect." If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. But even beauty comes with shadows. One evening, as Ethan scrolled through emails, he noticed a message from his company board, a reminder that the annual gala was coming up. It was a grand event, filled with the city's elite. He'd skipped it last year. This time, the media insisted that he and Lily attend, to show strength, unity, resilience. Lily hesitated when he told her. "They'll stare," she murmured. "Let them," Ethan said gently. "They'll see what grace really looks like." She smiled, small but sure, and agreed. The night of the gala, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lily descended the stairs in a gown the color of moonlight, simple yet elegant. Ethan, waiting below, forgot how to breathe for a moment. She wasn't just beautiful, She was luminous, like someone who had walked through hell and come back carrying the stars. When they arrived, the flashes began, hundreds of cameras capturing every step. Whispers rippled through the hall, some curious, some cruel. But Lily held her head high, her hand steady in Ethan's. Midway through the evening, a reporter approached. "Mrs. Cabot," she asked carefully, "how did you find the courage to face the world after everything?" Lily glanced at Ethan before answering. "Because love taught me that what's broken isn't worthless. Sometimes it's the cracks that let the light in." The crowd went silent. Then, slowly, applause spread, genuine, warm, human. Later, as they left the hall, Ethan whispered, "You've changed the story." She smiled softly. "No, I just stopped letting others write it." If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Weeks later, their home began to fill with life. Art supplies, laughter, the smell of rain through open windows. Lily began hosting art therapy sessions for survivors like her. Some days were heavy, tears, trembling voices, long silences, but every ending carried a note of relief. Ethan often watched from the doorway, amazed at how she transformed pain into beauty, just by listening. One evening, after everyone left, she found him standing quietly in the hallway. "You've been watching me again," she teased gently. "Maybe," he smiled. "It's hard not to." She walked closer, wiping pain from her cheek. "You know, I used to think my story ended when I was broken." He met her gaze. "And now I know it began there." The world outside hummed softly, cars passing, rain tapping at the windows. But inside, time seemed to pause. Ethan pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "You saved me too, you know." She frowned slightly. "How?" "Before you, I had everything that could be bought, and nothing that meant anything." She smiled through the tears that filled her eyes. "Then maybe we both learn how to be whole." He kissed her then, slow, reverent, like a promise finally kept. And for a moment, everything felt infinite. The next morning rose quietly, pale sunlight spilling through lace curtains, the soft hum of life stirring in every corner of their home. Lily stood on the balcony, mug in hand, her hair catching the breeze. Down below, children from the House of Light ran past the gates, their laughter rising like a hymn. Ethan watched her from the doorway, that same girl who had once stood on the edge of his world like a stranger. Now, she was his world. He walked up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "You're up early," he murmured. "I wanted to see the sunrise," she said. "It feels like a new one every day lately." He smiled. Maybe that's what healing looks like, learning to love ordinary mornings again. She leaned back against him, eyes closing. "You know what I realize?" "What?" "That all my life, I kept waiting for someone to save me. I never thought I'd end up saving myself, or someone else along the way." He kissed her temple. "You did both." A quiet moment passed between them, filled only by the sound of the wind. Then Lily turned, her eyes glimmering with something both soft and strong. "Do you ever wonder why life makes us go through pain before peace?" Ethan thought for a long second. "Maybe because peace means more when you've earned it." She smiled faintly. "I like that." They spent the day together at the House of Light. The children painted the walls with tiny hands, laughter echoing like music. Lily guided them, showing them how to blend colors, how to make mistakes beautiful. Ethan stood near the doorway, watching with quiet pride. When the mural was finally done, it stretched across the wall, hundreds of little suns and hearts, and in the center, Lily had painted a single phrase in golden letters. "The light you give is a light you keep." That evening, as the last child left and dusk folded over the city, Lily locked the gate and turned to Ethan. "You know, this place doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to them." He took her hand. Maybe that's what real love does. It keeps giving, even when it no longer needs to. They stood there for a while, watching the lights flicker on across the city, small, warm dots in the dark. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. A few months later, the House of Light hosted its first public exhibition. The children's artwork hung proudly beside Lily's. Visitors walked through the halls with quiet awe. Some smiled, some cried, most stayed longer than they planned. Each painting whispered a survival, of beauty born from scars. Ethan gave a small speech at the opening. "When I met Lily," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I thought she was the quietest person I'd ever known. I didn't realize silence can be the loudest kind of strength." Lily watched him from across the room, eyes glistening. After the crowd thinned, she stood before her newest piece, a simple painting of two figures standing under rain, holding one umbrella. Beneath it, she'd written in delicate script, "Even the storm looks smaller when someone stands beside you." She felt a hand slide into his. "Ethan, ready to go home?" he asked. She smiled softly. "This is home." They walked out into the cool night, the air smelling faintly of paint and hope. The world didn't feel so cruel anymore. Maybe it never truly was. Maybe it was just waiting for someone brave enough to see its beauty again. Lily looked up at the stars, the same ones you once thought were too far away. "Do you think people can change completely?" she asked. Ethan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "No," he said gently. "I think they just find the pieces they'd lost." She smiled. "Then I found mine." He looked at her, eyes soft, voice quiet. "No, Lily, you became mine." They stood there in silence as the world around them moved, cars passing, city lights blinking. But for that heartbeat, time belonged to them. Because love, when it's real, doesn't roar. It whispers. It stays. And somewhere, in the faint glow of streetlights and moon, their story ended the way all great love stories should. Not with perfection, but with peace. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, "Not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind." One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Moral: sometimes, life gives us people who look nothing like the salvation we imagined. Quiet souls who walk in when the world has walked out. Love isn't always loud, grand, or poetic. Sometimes it's a whisper that says, "I'll stay." And in staying, it heals everything that once felt unfixable.